Hey everyone, welcome back. So here's something you might not know, and it honestly shocked me when I first heard about it. There's a database inside the Social Security Administration that holds information on over 300 million Americans, your social security number, your birth date, even your parents' names. And according to whistleblowers, that entire database might have been copied into a system that wasn't properly secured. And the agency behind this, it's called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. A team created under President Trump to modernize federal agencies. Now, if that doesn't make you sit up a little straighter, I don't know what will, because if even part of that story is true, it could affect every single one of us. So stick with me, because understanding what really happened here could save you a lot of trouble down the line. Now, here's what we know so far. This all started when Chuck Voorhees, the chief data officer at the Social Security Administration, filed a whistleblower complaint in late August. He says DOGE created a live copy of that massive Social Security database and moved it into a cloud environment. The problem, that environment reportedly wasn't under the SSA's normal security protocols. In other words, there's now a live copy of your Social Security data sitting in a place where it's unclear who has access, and there's no full audit trail to track who's been looking at it. That's a pretty scary thought, right? And this isn't just some IT hiccup. The SSA itself labeled the situation very high risk, with the potential for what they called catastrophic impact. Imagine if that data got out. Every social security number in the country could be exposed. That's not just a headache, that's identity theft on a national scale. People could lose their benefits, banks could freeze accounts, and we'd be talking about years of cleanup. So how did DOGE get involved in the first place? Well, President Trump created this department at the start of his second term. The goal was to cut through red tape, speed up government processes, and use modern tech like AI to root out fraud and waste. And on paper, that sounds good. Most of us would agree that government systems can feel outdated and inefficient, but the way they went about it raised a lot of eyebrows. They brought in people from tech companies, even some with questionable backgrounds, and gave them access to incredibly sensitive federal systems. One name that keeps coming up is a 19-year-old cybersecurity specialist. Reports say he'd been linked to a hacking group before landing this job, but somehow he ended up with one of the highest security clearances in the federal system. And then there's a former Neuralink executive who became the chief information officer at the SSA. He was the one who approved moving the social security data into that cloud environment, even though internal security staff strongly advised against it. Now, according to DOGE, this was all about improving efficiency. They said that by having this live copy of the data, they could better coordinate across agencies and crack down on fraud. And sure, that's an important goal. Fraud costs taxpayers billions of dollars every year. But here's the thing. Efficiency shouldn't come at the cost of security, especially when we're talking about something as sensitive as social security numbers. And here's where the story gets even more complicated. Earlier this year, a federal court issued a restraining order that was supposed to stop DOGE from accessing SSA data. But Voorhees says that over one weekend in March, DOGE staff somehow regained access and might have even expanded what they could see. If that's true, it's not just a technical problem anymore. It could be a violation of federal law. You see, the SSA keeps saying publicly that there hasn't been a breach, that your data is safe and walled off from the internet. And maybe that's technically true. Maybe the data hasn't leaked out to the public, but that doesn't mean it's secure. Not when internal emails and risk assessments are warning about vulnerabilities and lack of oversight. That disconnect between the public statements and the internal concerns is what's making people nervous. And what's strange is that this isn't the first time we've seen something like this. Remember the OPM breach back in 2018 that exposed millions of federal employees' records and took years to clean up? Or the Equifax breach that hit almost everyone with a credit history? Those events cost billions of dollars and shook public trust. The difference here is that in this case, the risk is coming from inside the system itself. Not a foreign hacker, but an internal decision to bypass normal safeguards. So, what does this mean for you right now? Well, for most of us, nothing has happened yet. There's no sign that this data has been stolen or misused. But, and this is important, the risk is there, and that means you need to stay alert. One practical thing you can do is keep a close eye on your credit reports. You can get them for free every week at annualcreditreport.com. Look for accounts you don't recognize, addresses you've never lived at, or any changes that seem off. It takes a few minutes, and it can save you from a massive headache later. Another smart move is to set up fraud alerts or credit freezes with the major bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. A fraud alert makes it harder for someone to open new accounts in your name, and a credit freeze locks down your credit entirely until you lift it. It's a bit of a hassle, but it's one of the best protections you can have if there's ever a breach. And if you're someone who gets Social Security benefits, be extra cautious with any emails, texts, or calls you get claiming to be from the SSA. Scammers love to use moments like this to trick people into handing over information. The SSA will never call you out of the blue and demand payment or personal details. So if you get one of those calls, hang up. Now, here's something that surprised me. Even with all these concerns, Congress hasn't taken strong action yet. There are investigations happening, and some lawmakers are calling for tighter controls, but there's still a live copy of this database sitting in that Doge control cloud system. And unless there's a policy change or a legal order to shut it down, that copy isn't going anywhere. And that raises bigger questions. How much risk are we willing to accept for the sake of modernization? Should efficiency come before oversight? Because that's the trade-off we're seeing here. Doge's supporters argue that they're saving taxpayers money and making programs work better. But critics warned that rushing these changes without proper security is reckless. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that when you look at what's at stake. You know what's strange too? This whole situation has kind of flown under the radar. You'd think that news about the entire Social Security database being at risk would be everywhere. But it hasn't gotten the same attention as other scandals. Maybe it's because it's complicated, or maybe because no one has felt the immediate effects yet. But make no mistake, if something goes wrong, it won't just be a headline, it'll be a crisis. Speaking of oversight, remember how I mentioned those internal risk assessments? One of them reportedly said that if this data were compromised, it could take years and billions of dollars to fix. That's not something the government can just quietly sweep under the rug. It would mean reissuing Social Security numbers for the entire country. Imagine how disruptive that would be. Everything from your bank accounts to your tax records would need updating. And during that chaos, identity theft would explode. But here's a bit of perspective. This doesn't mean you should panic. The system isn't broken beyond repair, and there's still time to fix these vulnerabilities. What it does mean is that we need transparency and accountability. And that starts with knowing the facts, not just the headlines. So, what should you do next? Stay informed. Keep monitoring your credit. Be cautious with your personal information and pay attention to updates from trustworthy sources. And most importantly, talk about this. Share what you've learned with friends or family, especially those who might not follow the news closely. Because the more people understand the risk, the harder it becomes for officials to ignore it. And let's be real, this story is still developing. There are ongoing investigations, lawsuits, and hearings. We don't have all the answers yet, but what we do know is that the stakes are high and the decisions being made right now will affect how secure our information is for years to come. So, yeah, what do you think? Does this situation make you feel less confident about how your data is handled? Or do you think the government is doing the best it can with what it has?